Good afternoon. I know it's been a long afternoon after a pretty sumptuous lunch for most of us, and not sure what I can add after a very, very interesting spiel by Guneesh on what it takes to run a unit. And I think some of the previous speakers, Vishal, touched upon what are the drivers for sustainability, what's happening. Our firm keeps on working with a lot of large brands and retailers on doing program design and defining interventions for their supply chains. And so what I will do is quickly kind of walk you through what's been happening in this space more from a brands and retailers perspective, because I think that will give you a sense of what might happen in this space over the next 2 to 5 years and why most of us sitting on this dais feel changes in the air. Now, whether we accept it or we remain like ostriches to be taken away, only time can tell. I think some of this data in terms of what is the current size of the textile and apparel industry, where it is headed, is known. I mean, it's expected to be about 800 billion by 2015. We all know energy prices are up and rise and how that impacts us. The funny part is social compliance requirements has been around for a long time, but the environmental aspects have started showing up very slowly but surely in the way buyers, retailers are looked upon for their own compliances in their markets, and automatically, by extension, it will get extended to the supply chains. So what are the key drivers for sustainability? I mean, clearly, a lot of brand reputation and brand equity is at play. And most larger brands who have, they're about 20 odd, we've just come out with a large study called the March to Sustainability. We do this annually. We try and track buyer, brand, retailer action on this space. We just launched the recent one, which captures this. There is increasing resource constraints. I think we have already seen some of our clusters getting impacted and what it can mean. So water, energy, land is a constraint. We all know that. But if we kind of marry these drivers, that is where the change is in the air. On one hand, you have this challenge of resource management, resource constraints. On the other hand, your buyers are increasingly looking at ways to secure their own marketplace. And that is where they want to talk about their product being better. And their product being better means we need to be better for them. And then there is this growing niche of consumer groups, and Vishal also referenced it in context of not only textile but some other industries, where people are willing to buy less but buy what they perceive as better. And so is there a market opportunity for us in this emerging world of sustainable labels? So some of the brands who all, many of us have this desire, aspiration to work with the top brands. I think the top brands all, whether it's Walmart on the retail side or Marks and Spencer, etc., have very clear, defined go-forward strategy and go-forward plans when it comes to sustainability. And sustainability, in their case, touches upon many, many items, not just social compliance, but resource management, etc. And Marks and Spencer, I think, is probably a bit ahead of everybody else. They have a plan A, what they call, because in their words, there is no plan B. So they got to get it right. And, they have been trying to develop systems which will trace all the way from raw material stores to this clothing item as it gets into their stores. Puma, I think, is probably the first corporate worldwide to come out with a comprehensive P&L, a profit and loss, environmental profit and loss statement. I think for us as practitioners in the space, having worked with many companies, not only in textile but other sectors, I see that as a major first, which will start driving a lot of thought process going forward in the way people will start looking at this space. And it's a very interesting document and shows the full economic impact of the ecological systems on a product basis itself. H&M, I think, has started looking at Better Cotton Initiative and have made some definite announcements on that space. Levi Strauss, similarly, I mean, they have this waterless denim concept, which is, as a product brand, they're picking it up, and they are claiming to have saved about 60 million liters of water. So some very, very definite initiatives. Track my tea. I think this is a very interesting concept where our company, Annual Knitwear, has taken it, it talks about this T-shirt and how it ends up with the consumer and what is its journey right from the way it gets from the cotton, the spinner, and in the whole value chain. So these are the initiatives which are really driving sustainability, and sustainability is a business enabler to shape differentiation. So it is not just a mere CSR activity, which is how many of us view sustainability 5, 7, 8, 10 years back. But it's slowly coming as a core tenet to our business processes and business operations. The extended value chains are still not getting as impacted, but it is something which is irrevocable, and in our belief, something which will have a significant impact. And I'll make some predictions towards the end as to where we see the impact on supply chain in the years ahead. It's all backed by significant investments by these brands and retailers. So they are putting their money where their mouth is or their word is. Whether it is Nike, whether it is Puma, whether it is Marks and Spencer, whether it is Gap, they're all having very, very clear initiatives. Whether it is in terms of use of preferred materials, whether it is in terms of footprint assessments, and footprint assessments leading to definition of supplier categories. Many of the brands have started looking at long-term supplier consolidating their supply chain. They will have a bunch of suppliers with whom they will have 5-year contracts. With a few, they will have a 3-year outlook, and a large majority of suppliers will either get shunted out or would only have very transient annual contracts. And that is happening. We know of at least 3 large buyer/retailers doing that right now in India, and I think they will that movement will continue to move forward. They've also started investing, and getting firms like us and several of our competitors to come and work with their suppliers to do this footprint assessment and see what kind of benchmarks can be set up and what is that needed to. And the ideal scenario that they are working with is their suppliers are a party to this whole program design and intervention. But even in absence of that, with some of their model factories, they're already investing and trying to shape that up. There is what I call as a rewiring of the cotton supply chain that is happening. There is a climate change dimension to this conversation, which is probably may not even be long-term, may be just transient in nature, but is having a clear impact on how the supply chain is working and how the crop failure risk is now getting manifested in the supply chain. There is also this whole resource dimension, which I referenced earlier, which is forcing this focus towards a sustainability sourced cotton. I mean, Adidas has made a apparel using better cotton. ICAHT has started doing that and would continue to support the Better Cotton initiative. And there are many programs which have been set up. I mean, for example, there's a Better Cotton Fast Track, which has said about 1 million tons of better cotton by 2015. And even outside of Better Cotton initiative, firms like C&A have invested in specialist organizations, including in India, the Cotton Connect as an example, where they are working through the entire, right from the farmer into the supply chain and value chain coordination mapping in order to ensure the quality of the raw material. So I think there is a definite desire to engage right from the crop going forward. Labor, I think, has been well known. I mean, there has been, Nike has had this program as an example of lean and human resource management. The goal is not only to increase productivity, but also to increase higher, wages are a big part of this. And so higher paid workforce is the way they are looking at it, combined with the productivity angle to create a win-win scenario. We have some work with H&M who are working with the International Textile Garment and Leather Workers Federation to create a ban on sandblasting, etc. Some of the practices it is environmentally hazardous for the workers. And there was an incident where I think 7 or 8 workers died in one of the factories, and since that time, I mean, actually 40 in Turkey overall in that year. but in one particular incident it was about 10, and that is what triggered the change and the movement in this direction. So clearly a move from CSR to core business activity, as I mentioned. PPR, which is the parent company of Puma, has a 10 million euro budget for something what they're calling as PPR Home Initiative, whose primary goal, or the primary goal of that, is to set up a new standard in sustainability and business practices. M&S, as I mentioned, has already committed 200 million pounds for a 5-year plan starting 2007 to 2012, and they are looking at generating almost about 70 million pounds return on this investment in just 2010, 2011, which is about 50 million pounds more than what they generated the previous year. So these are clear ROI-led investments. So it's not just to create a good feel around their brand, but it is clearly to get significant returns on these investments, which also means that the level of seriousness with which they are kind of viewing their supply chain and viewing their vendors is getting reflected in their actions going forward. So what is the message for manufacturers across the value chain? I'm using the word very loosely, but whether it is government guys, whether it is in the further downstream supply chain or upstream supply chain, depending on where you are, is clearly there is an opportunity to use sustainability as an opportunity. The challenge is how do you shape business cases which allow you to demonstrate returns today. I think there are some baby steps that can be done. At the same time, there are niche markets that one can play in. There are labels and certifications that have a significant relevance. They may not be large quantities initially, but I think there is a niche market that is evolving for sure, both in Europe and in US, that one can play into. There is growing awareness around business cases for energy conservation and reduction in chemical usage, which are also becoming quite apparent. In fact, textile is one of the designated consumers even in the National Mission on Energy Efficiency under the PAT scheme. And I think while overall as a sector we only add up to 2% of the power, but I think the trading opportunity around that e-certs is going to be a big one in this sector as we go along. And areas where the manufacturers can look in about sustainability in context of their supply chain is both in terms of what are their sourcing strategy and goals. How do you look at materials? Sustainable materials, I think, is an area which has not really been tapped in a big way. And I think there is going to be increasing pressures to look at those. We have, we had this large event in March where about 70 odd textile service providers and textile manufacturers participated. And we had about 10 odd people who have come out with sustainable materials which have been adopted by larger brands and buyers. And these are very small niche players in India, but the fact that they were able to get the attention of Walmarts of the world was a significant indication of where the thought process is headed. And then we have the regular issues around labor and, of course, tracking and compliance. And I think, to Ganesha's point, most buyers do want to see what tracking measures you have and what kind of adherence norms we have around compliances. So what is our belief? Our belief is there will be a revamp of the cotton supply chain. There will be unification of standards. See, the challenge around standards is each buyer in the past has been having and trying to promote a certain set of standards, a certain set of expectations, and it has been always seen as a hassle by the suppliers and hassle both in terms of effort and cost. But we feel, given the collaborative conversations that are happening, whether it is a sustainability apparel coalition and some others like that, there will be unification of sustainability standards, reporting and tracking systems. There will be long-term contracts and consolidation of buyers. I mentioned that we already know the 3 large buyers are doing that in India, which will significantly alter their buying patterns in India. I mean, by a very, very significant impact, I think, on a lot of people here. And then I think there will be a very different level of coordination that will emerge between the manufacturers and the buyers when it comes to audits. I think the direction that it will go, it will be joint audits or mutual audits of some sort. And then those are the 3 broad buckets in which we see change happening and the impact on the supply chain.